This is the story of a girl born into light, Amaka, the pastor's daughter whose life was meant to be simple, pure, and predictable. But hidden beneath her calm smile was a destiny her parents never spoke of, a secret tied to a vow made long before she took her first breath. They said she was blessed, chosen, protected. Yet the same life they called holy was the very life a forgotten spirit rose to claim. In this folktale, you will watch how innocence can collide with ancient promises, how love can bloom in places feared by many, and how sometimes the battle for one soul can shake an entire village. Because Amaka was not just her father's daughter, she was the child of an oath, and the one destiny refused to let go. Amaka Nwosu had grown up in a world where life was neatly arranged like the hymn books in her father's church, orderly, predictable, untouched by the chaos that lived outside the gates of Salvation Fire Ministry. From childhood, she was the girl every mother pointed to with pride, respectful, gentle, prayerful, the perfect daughter of a beloved pastor. She swept the church floors with devotion, led the youth choir with a voice that softened hearts, and memorized whole chapters of scripture before her friends even learned their multiplication tables. Her future seemed so certain it almost felt pre-written. "You will carry my mantle," her father always told her, pride shining in his eyes like the morning sun. You were chosen for this. And Amaka believed him until the afternoon the wind changed, and with it, her destiny. It was a market day, hot and dusty, with the sun burning like a brass bowl overhead. She had gone to buy cassava flour for her mother when her path crossed with a man the villagers whispered about in frightened tones. Chukwemeka, the native doctor who lived near the boundary forest. He stood under the ancient udera tree, buying herbs from an old woman, his frame tall and still like a dark shadow against the light. His presence felt like the hush before a storm, quiet, charged, unsettling. His eyes, when they lifted and met hers, held a strange depth. Not wicked, not cruel, but ancient. Knowing, the kind of eyes that had seen secrets she would never learn in church. Amaka froze. Her knees went weak. Not from fear, but from something she had no name for. She quickly looked away, silently reciting Psalm 23 to steady her racing heart. She had been taught to fear men like him, to avoid them, to see them as enemies of God. But her feet refused to move, as if they too were caught in his gaze. When she finally found the strength to walk away, her heart thumped against her ribs like a trapped bird. She didn't understand herself. She had faced armed robbers before during a midnight crusade. She had prayed for sick villagers without flinching. She had walked through cemeteries while evangelizing without fear. But this man, this stranger with calm eyes and quiet presence, had shaken her in ways she never imagined possible. That night, she buried herself in prayer, kneeling beside her bed long after the household had fallen asleep. Her candle flickered wildly as if responding to her restless thoughts. "Lord," she whispered, "why do I feel this way? He is a man of the old ways, a man of idols, a man I should never go near." And yet, when she closed her eyes, she saw him standing beneath the udera tree, the wind stirring the hem of his wrapper, the faintest sadness resting upon his face. The more she tried to chase the image away, the more it returned. Sleep refused to come. By dawn, she had made up her mind. She would forget him, pretend the encounter never happened. But the world had other plans. 3 days later, while returning from choir practice, her path curved toward the narrow footpath that led to the village boundary, the same path rumor claimed Chukwemeka often walked. Amaka hesitated for long minutes, her heart a drumbeat in her chest, torn between fear and something dangerously close to curiosity. She had just decided to take the longer route home when she heard a soft rustling behind her. She turned, and there he was. Chukwemeka stood a few feet away, his hands clasped behind him, his expression unreadable yet strangely gentle. He bowed his head slightly in greeting, his voice deep and steady like distant thunder. "Daughter of Pastor Nwosu," he said calmly. "Your scarf." He held out the blue scarf she had wrapped around her hair earlier that day. She hadn't even realized it had fallen. Her breath caught. She took it from him quickly, her fingers brushing his, sending a shiver up her arm she hoped he didn't notice. "Thank you," she managed, her voice trembling more than she liked. She stepped back, but he did not move toward her. He simply watched her with the kind of quiet respect she did not expect. "Fear not," he said softly, perhaps sensing her tension. "I mean you, no harm." His words should have comforted her, but instead, they unsettled her more. How did he know she was afraid? Why did his voice feel like calm waters after a storm? She swallowed hard, willing herself to leave, but her feet remained glued to the ground. 1,000 warnings from her childhood echoed in her mind. Do not speak to men like him. Stay away from their world. Darkness and light cannot mix. Yet, standing before him, she felt none of the evil she had been taught to expect. Instead, she felt a pull, subtle, quiet, yet powerful, like a hand gently guiding her toward a door she had never noticed before. And as she looked into his eyes, she saw not wickedness, but sorrow, deep, aching sorrow. She didn't know why. She didn't dare ask. But something inside her whispered that the stories about him were not the full truth. By the time she returned home, the sun had dipped low, staining the sky in colors she couldn't describe. Her mother scolded her for being late. The church women questioned her the next morning when she arrived distracted and unusually quiet. Her father paused mid-sermon rehearsal, his eyes narrowing as if sensing a shift in the spirit. And deep within her, Amaka knew something irreversible had begun. She tried to bury it. She tried to pray it away. But the memory of his voice, the sadness in his eyes, the strange calm that wrapped around her in his presence, it stayed. And for the first time in her life, she found herself questioning everything she had ever been taught, questioning what was truly evil and what was simply misunderstood. The villagers whispered that the native doctor had a destiny tied to darkness. The church elders warned that Amaka was too pure to be tangled in ancient shadows. But destiny has never cared for rules written by men. And on that quiet evening, with the moon rising slowly over the village roofs, Amaka realized something unsettling, something thrilling, something dangerous. Her life was changing, and whatever force had brought Chukwuemeka across her path was not finished with her. Not yet. The day after her encounter with Chukwuemeka, the village seemed louder than usual, too loud, too watchful, too full of eyes that seemed to pierce through Amaka's carefully guarded calm. She tried to busy herself with chores, sweeping the compound, fetching water, and helping her mother prepare ogbono soup for the evening service workers, but her mind wandered like a stubborn goat that refused to be tied. Every sound startled her, every voice made her glance over her shoulder. The memory of Chukwuemeka returning her scarf lingered in her thoughts like an unfinished psalm. His voice echoed in her mind, not as a threat, but as something hauntingly gentle, unsettling in its kindness. Daughter of Pastor Nwosu, fear not. The words replayed over and over. She could still feel the brush of his fingers against hers, light, brief, yet strong enough to ripple through her bones. She had memorized scriptures her entire life, but never had a single moment shaken her this deeply. By noon, the tension boiling inside her became impossible to hide. During choir practice, she missed notes she had never missed before, staring blankly at the lyrics she had known by heart since childhood. Even the church pianist paused, watching her with concern. "Amaka, are you all right?" he asked gently. She nodded quickly, but the light cracked at the edges. She blamed it on headache, on not sleeping well, on the heat, but deep inside, she knew the truth. Something inside her had awakened, something neither fear nor prayer could silence. And as the hours passed, that feeling only grew stronger. By late afternoon, whispers had already begun swirling through the market square and around the community taps. It didn't take much to ignite gossip in Nwokohia village. Just a glance, a coincidence, a rumor carried by one woman and polished by the next. Amaka didn't even realize her name had entered the mouths of villagers until she overheard two women whispering under the mango tree near the church. "I saw her near the forest path yesterday evening," one murmured, shifting her baby from one hip to the other. "You know who passes that path." The second woman's eyes widened. "Eh? The one they call the Keeper of Shadows?" "Shh. Don't say it loudly." "But yes. Him." She leaned closer. "They say she stopped when he stopped. That they spoke." The second woman gasped. "A pastor's daughter? Speaking with a native doctor? Tufiakwa." Their voices dropped, but the words burned into Amaka's ears like fire on dry leaves. Her breath caught, her heart pounding hard enough to shake her ribs. She stepped back, her sandals crunching softly on the dry leaves, but the women heard. They turned, and their eyes widened even further when they saw her standing there. Not out of guilt, not even out of concern, but out of something worse. Expectation. As if they were already waiting for her to crack, to slip, to confirm their suspicions. "Amaka, my dear," one of them said loudly, too loudly, "hope all is well. You look troubled." The other nodded, lips pressed tightly together, eyes scanning her like a sinner caught at a liquor shop. Shame washed over her like icy rain. She muttered a polite greeting and walked away quickly, her throat tightening with humiliation. She had barely spoken to Chukwuemeka. How did it already become a story? How fast would this reach her father's ears? She could already imagine the disappointment in his gaze, the prayers, the rebuke, the Bible verses used like a shield. The fear didn't come from judgment alone. It came from something deeper. A part of her feared that if she denied the encounter too strongly, she would also be denying the strange spark she felt inside her. But if she admitted it, the world she knew would crumble. As sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, the village grew quieter, the air thicker, the shadows longer. Evening devotion at the church pulled everyone together, women tying their wrappers tightly, children running ahead, men discussing harvest prospects as they walked. Amaka joined the procession, her Bible clutched tightly against her chest. Her father stood at the church entrance greeting people as they arrived, his white robe glowing softly in the fading light. His face always carried that calm, reassuring warmth, the kind that made villagers trust him, confide in him, rely on him. But tonight, Amaka felt the weight of his gaze more than ever. "Nwam, you're quiet today," he said gently as she approached. "Your spirit seems heavy." She forced a smile. "I'm fine, Papa. Just tired." He studied her closely, his eyes narrowing slightly, discerningly, eyes that had seen countless lies, confessions, and secrets over the years. But instead of questioning further, he placed a hand on her shoulder and prayed softly, asking God to strengthen her. The moment should have comforted her, but instead it tightened a knot in her stomach. If he ever learned she had been near the boundary forest, if he ever found out she had spoken to him. She shuddered at the thought. The prayer session began, hymns rising like smoke into the night sky, drums beating in rhythmic patterns. But Amaka struggled to focus. Instead, her mind drifted to the forest path, to the blue scarf still folded neatly in her drawer, to the deep sadness in Chukwuemeka's eyes. She tried to shut it out, but every time she closed her eyes to pray, she saw him again. And worst of all, in a moment that frightened her to her core. She didn't want the memory to leave Dot after devotion ended. Her father announced that the church elders would be meeting the next evening to discuss a troubling spiritual matter in the village. The congregation murmured anxiously. Her father explained that certain forces of darkness had been stirring near the boundary forest, unsettling dreams, unexplained sicknesses, strange sightings. "We must remain vigilant," he declared. "This is not the time to mingle with what we do not understand." His eyes swept across the congregation, but Amaka felt the words pierce directly into her chest, sharp and personal. She lowered her gaze, suddenly unable to breathe. Did he know? Had someone already told him? Her mind raced with panic. After service, everyone dispersed under the moonlit sky, but Amaka slipped away quietly, avoiding the chatter, avoiding questions, avoiding her father's searching eyes. She took the longer route home, walking near the edge of the village farmland, where the crickets chirped loudly and fireflies flickered like tiny spirits. She needed space to breathe, to think. But the deeper she walked into the quiet night, the more something inside her stirred, an awareness, a pull, a calling she could not explain. She paused beneath a tall palm tree, clutching her Bible to her chest, whispering a prayer for strength. And then, suddenly, the wind shifted. The air grew colder. The night deepened. She felt it before she saw anything, a presence, subtle yet undeniable, like a shadow stepping out of hiding. Her heart thumped loudly as she turned. And there, standing just beyond the line of moonlight, was Chukwuemeka. For a moment, the world stood painfully still, as if even the night had paused to breathe. Amaka's heart beat so loudly she feared the whole village would hear it. She tightened her grip on her Bible instinctively, her palms damp, her breath shallow. Chukwuemeka took a single step forward, enough for the moonlight to touch his face. There was no maliciousness in his expression, no threat, no hint of the darkness the elders warned against. Instead, she saw the same quiet sadness she'd noticed before, a heaviness that seemed woven into his very being. His voice, when he spoke, was low and steady, carrying the calm of someone who had walked through storms long before she ever knew what fear was. "You should not walk alone this late, Amaka," he said gently. He didn't call her daughter or Pastor Nwosu this time. He called her by name. The sound of her name on his tongue unsettled something deep within her. She swallowed hard. I should be going," she whispered, though her feet refused to move. She didn't know if it was fear keeping her rooted to the spot or curiosity. "I mean you, no harm," he repeated softly, raising his hand slightly to show he carried nothing. "This road is watched, and the night has ears." His words sent a cold shiver through her spine. "What does that mean?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Chukwuemeka looked past her, his gaze drifting into the shadows, as if he were listening for something only he could hear. "There are things your people do not see," he murmured. Not because they are blind, but because they refuse to look. Amaka felt her pulse quicken. She had been raised to see the world in clear lines, good versus evil, light versus darkness, scripture versus tradition. But standing here now, in the quiet breath of the night, she realized the world might be far more complicated than her father's teachings. "Why are you here?" she asked finally, summoning a boldness she didn't know she had. Chukwuemeka turned his gaze back to her, and for the first time, she noticed something: tiredness. Deep soul-worn tiredness, like a man burdened by a secret he had carried too long. "I came to warn you," he said simply. That made her step back. "Warn me? About what?" He hesitated, as if choosing his words with great care. "There are movements in the land," he began quietly. "Shifts, signs, things your father's people feel but cannot name." Amaka shook her head quickly. If there is danger, tell my father. He will pray. Prayer is powerful. Chukwuemeka interrupted softly, but even prayer needs truth to stand on. She froze, unsure whether to be offended, insulted, or intrigued. What truth? She pressed. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Conflict, fear, restraint. His jaw tightened. Not tonight, he said finally. You're not ready. His refusal only made her chest tighten with frustration. Then why warn me at all? She demanded, trying to sound bold, though her voice trembled. Chukwuemeka looked at her with something like regret. Because the shadow moving through this village is tied to you, Amaka, he said quietly. And the air has begun to whisper your name. Fear struck her like lightning. Tied to me, she whispered. That cannot be. Chukwuemeka said nothing. The silence stretched between them until the night seemed to press closer around them. Amaka shook her head fiercely, gripping her Bible tighter. No, she said. This is confusion. Whatever you see or hear, leave me out of it. She took a step back, her breath shaky. I don't belong to your world. His eyes softened, but not with offense, with understanding. I know, he said gently. And I never asked you to turn slightly, as if preparing to leave, but pause. But your world and mine are not as far apart as you think. His voice had changed, lower, heavier, touched with something ancient. The elders have begun to stir. The land is restless, and a name has been spoken among the trees. He looked directly at her. Your name. Amaka felt her blood turn cold. Her throat dried. Stop, she said sharply, fear twisting her insides. Stop saying these things. I don't want to hear them. Chukwuemeka bowed his head slightly, respecting her plea. Then forgive me, he murmured. But truth does not bend because we fear it. I speak only what I see. She didn't know what terrified her more, the calm certainty in his voice or the possibility that he believed every word he said. She staggered backward, her heart slamming against her ribs. Stay away from me, she whispered. Please. The plea wasn't strong. It wasn't even convincing. And she hated that part of herself, because another part, a small forbidden part, wanted him to stay, wanted answers, wanted the thread that connected them to be named. But Chukwuemeka only nodded once, stepping back into the darkness. As you wish, Amaka Nwosu, he said quietly. But whether I stay away or not, the shadow will still look for you. She stood frozen long after he disappeared into the trees, her body trembling. The night felt thicker now, as if his words had stirred something within it. She hurried home, her breathing uneven, glancing over her shoulder every few steps. By the time she reached the compound, her mother was calling her name, worry lining her voice. Amaka, where did you go? Why are you shaking? But Amaka could not answer. She shut herself in her room, her heart still racing, her mind spinning with fear, confusion, and something dangerously close to longing. She turned on the bulb in her room and sank to her knees, praying desperately, praying for clarity, for deliverance, for courage. But as the words fell from her lips, something else filled her mind. Chukwuemeka's eyes, dark and sorrowful, the quiet strength in his voice, the strange way he seemed to know things no one else could. She pressed her palms to her forehead, torn between everything she had been taught and everything she had begun to feel. One moment of weakness, one glance, one encounter, and now her soul felt as though it were caught between two worlds. She prayed harder, but the strange heaviness did not lift. And somewhere in the darkness, outside her window, a gust of wind blew hard against the wooden panels, followed by a soft but distinct whisper, a whisper that curled into her room like smoke, brushing her ears with a chilling certainty. Amaka, her eyes snapped open. The lamp flickered violently. And for the first time in her life, Amaka realized she was standing at the edge of a destiny she did not understand, a destiny she feared, and yet one she could no longer run from. The following morning carried a strange heaviness, as though the night had left its shadow draped across the entire village. Roosters crowed, women fetched water, children chased one another through the red dust paths. But for Amaka, the world felt muffled, distant, unreal. She moved through the motions of her chores like someone walking underwater, her mind echoing with the whisper she heard the previous night, soft, chilling, unmistakable. Amaka. Every time the memory resurfaced, her skin prickled. Had she imagined it? Was it the wind? Or was it truly something more sinister, something tied to the warning Chukwuemeka had spoken? Her thoughts tangled like vines, tightening with every attempt to pull free. When she joined her father for morning devotion, she struggled to focus, stumbling over verses she had recited effortlessly since childhood. Her father paused mid-hymn, studying her with concern. "Nwam, is all well?" he asked gently. She nodded too fast. "I'm fine, Papa." But Pastor Nwosu was not a man easily deceived. He set aside his Bible and reached for her hand. "Amaka, grief does not always come from loss. Sometimes confusion and fear can grieve the spirit as well. talk to me. She wanted to. She truly did. But how could she tell her father, the village's shepherd, the man who preached against ancestral powers, that his daughter had spoken with the native doctor at night? That the man had warned her of a shadow tied to her destiny? That she had heard a whisper no human voice could have produced? If she confessed even a fraction of it, her father might treat it as spiritual attack. The elders might hold deliverance sessions. The entire village would know. And Chukwuemeka, she couldn't bear to imagine what they would do to him. So she forced a smile and tightened her grip on his hand. I'm only tired, Papa. I didn't sleep well. He nodded slowly, not fully convinced but unwilling to pressure her further. Rest well today, he said softly. Your spirit must remain clear. There is a meeting tonight. The elders have sensed something in the land. His voice dropped lower. Keep yourself pure and prayerful, Amaka. Dark things move when hearts grow weak. His words struck her like a slap. Dark things. If only he knew the one thing weakening her heart was not darkness, but confusion. Confusion tied to a man the village feared and misunderstood. She whispered an amen, but her hand trembled. By mid-afternoon, the village was humming with tension. Word had spread that the elders were gathering for a special prayer council, something they hadn't done in nearly 6 years. Women whispered anxiously at the stream, men spoke in hushed tones under the palm wine shed, and children were warned to return home before dusk. Strange things had been happening, goats collapsing for no reason, a child waking with unexplained scars, a widow dreaming of voices calling her name from the river. The elders believed an ancient stirring had begun, and while the villagers speculated about angry ancestors, evil spirits, or hidden sins, they all agreed on one thing. Something had trespassed into the village, something neither the church nor the shrines had full hold over. Amaka listened to these whispers as she moved through the marketplace, her heart growing heavier with each tale. Was this what Chukwuemeka meant when he spoke of shifts and movements? Did he know the source? Did it truly concern her? She tried to push the thought aside as she purchased palm oil and dried fish, but every shadow seemed darker, every rustle sharper, every gaze more suspicious. Her heart thudded painfully when she noticed 2 old women watching her from a distance, their whispers weaving into the air like smoke. One of them pointed subtly toward the forest path. She was seen there, the woman murmured. At night, the second woman's expression darkened. If she has begun to mingle with that man, trouble will follow. A pastor's daughter consorting with a man of the old ways? Abomination. Amaka lowered her head and walked quickly, her cheeks burning. Shame and fear clashed violently inside her. She had not consorted. She had only spoken with him twice. But the village did not need truth to form judgment, only suspicion. And suspicion had already begun its poisonous work. She hurried back toward home, but as she passed the boundary where farmland met bush, a sudden rustling came from the trees. Her breath caught. She froze. The leaves parted slightly, and a familiar figure stepped into view. Chukwuemeka. He did not walk toward her. He simply stood there, half hidden, the wind tugging at the edges of his dark wrapper. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held something urgent. Why are you here? She whispered, glancing around to ensure no one saw them. You must not be seen near me. I have no choice, he said quietly. You are in danger. The words punched the breath out of her. Why? What have I done? Nothing, he said. But something old has awakened. Something that knows you. She stepped back, heart racing in terror. Stop saying these things, she pleaded, her voice cracking. I don't want them to be true. His jaw tightened, as if he wanted to reach for her but knew he shouldn't. Truth does not stop being truth because we close our eyes, he said softly. Tonight, the elders will speak of signs, but they do not know everything. I have seen more. He looked toward the evening sky, where a flock of black birds circled unnaturally low. The land has begun to whisper, and the shadow has begun to follow your scent. Her stomach dropped. Why me? She whispered. His answer was barely audible. Because your path is tied to a forgotten oath, one made before you were born. The world tilted. Amaka's breath hitched, her knees weakening. What oath? She cried. But before he could speak, voices approached from behind her. Familiar voices. Her father's. The church deacons. Chukwuemeka immediately stepped back into the trees, disappearing like smoke. Amaka whirled around just in time to see her father approaching with a torch in hand. Amaka, he said sharply. What are you doing here? She forced a smile, though her pulse hammered violently. I was coming home, Papa. He glanced around suspiciously. From the forest side. Why? The lie caught in her throat. Shortcut, she whispered. The deacon exchanged a look with her father, one filled with quiet judgment. Pastor Nwosu's face hardened. "Go home," he said sternly. "We need to prepare." Amaka obeyed, but her steps were unsteady. She did not realize until she reached the gate of their compound that her hands were trembling. Night settled thickly over Unwokohea, wrapping the village in a restless hush as lamps flickered and windows closed tightly. The elders gathered in the church, their low voices vibrating through the walls like a warning drum. Amaka sat on her bed, hugging her knees to her chest, barely breathing as muffled prayers and chants drifted across the compound. Her mother paced outside the door, whispering anxious supplications. Her father's voice led the session, firm, commanding, edged with fear. "We must not allow darkness to claim our land," he declared. "Every hidden thing must be exposed." His words stabbed her heart. She thought of Chukwuemeka's promise to explain the truth of her situation. She thought of the whisper that called her name. She thought of the oath she knew nothing about. Questions raced through her mind like wild horses, but answers hid behind a wall of fear she could not break through. As the prayer session grew louder, the wind outside shifted violently. The bulb on Amaka's table flickered once, twice, then burst into a sharp, thin flame. The curtains rattled. Something tapped against the window. Tap, tap, tap. Her heartbeat stuttered. She slowly rose to her feet, each step hesitant, as if the air itself were holding her back. She reached for the window, but before her hand touched the frame, the whisper came again, clearer this time, deeper, more urgent. "Amaka." Her breath froze. She stumbled backward, her back hitting the wall. The flame of the lamp elongated unnaturally, stretching upward like a hand reaching for the ceiling. Outside, the tapping grew louder, faster, until it became frantic. Then suddenly, everything stopped. Silence swallowed the room. The wind stilled. The flame steadied. The tapping ceased. But the air carried a message so heavy she felt it settle on her skin like dust. Whatever had begun was no longer watching her from afar. It was now standing at the threshold of her life. And the choice between her father's world and the world calling her name had just become a matter of destiny. Amaka barely slept that night. The whisper still echoed in her ears, crawling across her skin like a cold hand she could not shake off. Every small sound made her flinch. The hoot of an owl, the rustling of the palm fronds, the distant barking of dogs unsettled by something they could sense but not understand. Even the silence felt alive. When a faint light finally crept into the sky, she rose shakily from her bed, exhausted but unable to rest. The elders' prayer meeting had stretched long past midnight, and the village carried the heaviness of it like a shroud. Women moved slowly, faces tense, speaking in hushed voices as they prepared breakfast. Men gathered in small groups, discussing strange signs seen near the riverbank, unusual footprints at the edge of the forest, shadows that lingered in places where shadows shouldn't be. The entire village felt like a drum stretched too tight. One wrong touch would make it burst. Amaka slipped out of the house to fetch water from the well, hoping the cool morning air would clear her mind. But as she walked, she sensed eyes watching her, unseen, unblinking, constant. Every step felt like walking deeper into a truth she did not understand. When she reached the well, she nearly dropped her bucket. Standing a short distance away was Mama Ijiki, the oldest woman in the village, known for her sharp tongue and sharper intuition. Her eyes, deeply set beneath wrinkled lids, followed Amaka with a stare that felt too knowing. Nwanyi Oma. The old woman said slowly, "You walk like someone carrying a burden the earth did not give you." Amaka's breath hitched. I am fine, Mama," she stammered, forcing a weak smile. Mama Ijiki stepped closer. Despite her age, her movements were deliberate, precise. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The wind has been speaking," she murmured, "and when the wind speaks, only fools pretend not to hear." Amaka's heart slammed against her ribs. "Mama, what do you mean?" The old woman exhaled heavily. "Before dawn, I heard a name in my dream, a name whispered by something older than this village." She paused, eyes locked on Amaka's, unblinking. "It called your name." The ground seemed to tilt beneath Amaka. "No," she whispered, stepping back. "It can't be." But Mama Ijike only shook her head. "Child, destiny is not a visitor you can send away with prayer. When it comes with its feet planted in the soil." For a moment, Amaka could not breathe, not because she feared the old woman, but because this was the second time in less than 24 hours she had heard the same thing from two completely different worlds. First from Chukwuemeka, the man of the old ways, now from Mama Ijik, the woman who listened to the land. Both spoke of whispers. Both spoke of her. Amaka wanted to run. She wanted to scream. She wanted to tear herself away from whatever path was pulling her forward. But destiny is a net. Once it catches you, every struggle only entangles you further. By midday, The village atmosphere had thickened even more. Rumors of what the elders discussed the night before traveled like wildfire. Some said a spiritual attack was looming. Others claimed an ancient spirit had woken from the boundary forest. A few whispered that someone in the village had been marked. Amaka felt every glance like a sting. Unable to bear the tension, she slipped outside, her feet carrying her toward the far end of the compound where the thick bushes began. She needed air. She needed space. She needed silence from the whispers repeating themselves in her mind. But as she reached the edge of the bushes, she froze. Standing there, leaning against a tall Iroko tree, was Chukwuemeka. "Why won't you leave me alone?" Chukwuemeka's expression softened with a sorrow so deep it almost broke her heart. "Because you are walking into the center of something that concerns you," he said quietly. "And whether you want to hear it or not, your safety is tied to knowing the truth. Tell me everything." He stepped forward slowly, carefully, as if approaching a wounded animal. "Then listen," he said, "and listen well." He paused, letting the silence settle like dust on dry ground. "Years ago, before you were born, your father made a vow." Amaka blinked. "A vow?" Chukwuemeka nodded. "A desperate one. A dangerous one. One he believed would save his family." Her heart pounded. "Papa? My father would never, your father," Chukwuemeka said softly, "was once a man who feared losing everything he loved. And in the night of that fear, he placed your life in the hands of what he did not fully understand. An oath was made. Your name, your destiny, was tied to an ancient covenant, one that has now awakened." But even she didn't believe the words coming out of her own mouth. Chukwuemeka looked at her with eyes heavy with truth. "Amaka, the shadow following you, is coming to claim what it was promised." The moment his eyes found hers, they were filled with anguish, fear, and something deeper. Because standing behind Amaka, unseen by her, but fully visible to him, something shifted the air. Something ancient. Something dangerous. Something that had been whispering her name. In one swift, terrified motion, Chukwuemeka lunged forward, grabbing her and pulling her to his chest. "Don't look back," he hissed. "Amaka, don't look." But it was too late. The wind roared. The trees bent violently, and a cold whisper slithered through the clearing, louder than before, clearer than ever. "I have found you." Amaka's scream tore through the air as the world around her shattered into darkness. Just when the darkness pressed too close, something slammed into her, a warm force, solid and urgent. Arms, hands, a voice. Familiar. "Amaka, Amaka, breathe." The world snapped back in a violent rush, light, sound, air. She collapsed against something firm and warm, her knees buckling. Someone caught her before she hit the ground. Her vision blurred, the clearing spinning wildly. Voices filled her ears, the frightened murmurs of villagers, the rustling of leaves, the rising wind. And through the chaos, she heard her name again, but this time, not from the shadow that hunted her. "Amaka, look at me." She forced her eyes open. It was Chukwuemeka. His chest rose and fell with breathless urgency, sweat glistening on his brow, his expression tight with terror. He held her shoulders firmly, steadying her as though he feared she might vanish again. Their eyes locked. And in that moment, everything inside her, fear, confusion, denial, shattered into trembling truth. Whatever was chasing her was real, very real. And Chukwuemeka was the only reason she was still standing. The clearing around them had changed entirely. The girl who had been screaming moments before was now unconscious, carried away by villagers who muttered prayers under their breath. The air still vibrated with an unnatural tension, as though the earth itself had witnessed something it could not comprehend. Shadows clung stubbornly to the edges of the clearing, refusing to disperse despite the rising sunlight. Animals had fled, birds were silent. Even the wind had ceased its restless cry. Pastor Nwosu arrived moments later, his robe flaring like a banner of authority, his Bible clutched tightly in hand. He took one look at the remnants of the chaos, then at Amaka trembling in Chukwuemeka's arms, and his expression darkened into something between fury and fear. "Let her go," he ordered sharply. Chukwuemeka hesitated, just one heartbeat of hesitation. But in that single moment, an entire world of meaning passed between them, the weight of the danger, the urgency of his presence, the unspoken truth that he had saved her. Then he released her gently. Amaka staggered, struggling to regain her balance, but before she could take a step forward, her father grabbed her wrist and pulled her to his side. "What happened?" he demanded, though the question wasn't truly a question. It was an accusation. Amaka opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Her throat was tight, her breath unsteady. She didn't know how to explain what had happened. She didn't even understand it herself. Chukwuemeka, still catching his breath, stepped forward. She was being pulled, he said quietly. And if I hadn't, enough. Pastor Nwosu roared, his voice echoing through the trees. The villagers fell silent, fear rippling through the group dot. The pastor pointed at Chukwuemeka with trembling fury. You dare speak here? You dare touch my daughter? His breathing grew ragged. Whatever is happening in this village, whatever evil has awakened, you are at the center of it. Chukwuemeka's jaw tightened. He lowered his eyes, but not in shame, in restraint. I didn't come to fight you, Pastor, he said quietly, only to warn her. Her father's eyes blazed. Warn her? About what? The question split the air in two. Amaka's pulse quickened. She wanted to scream at him to stop, to not say it here, not publicly, not before the entire village. But Chukwuemeka's gaze shifted to her, softening with something painful, almost protective. About a vow, he said simply. Gasps rippled across the clearing. Her father stiffened. What vow? He growled. Chukwuemeka held his gaze for a long moment. Then he shook his head. Not here. She must hear it alone. Away from the fear of eyes. Away from judgments. Never. Pastor Nwosu spat. You will not take another step toward my daughter. You will not speak to her again. You will not. Suddenly the ground beneath them trembled. Just slightly, but enough for every villager to gasp and cling to one another. Birds burst from nearby trees in frantic flocks, screeching. A cold gust of wind whipped through the clearing, swirling the dust in a violent spiral. And then, a whisper. Deep. Ancient. Everywhere. She is mine. The crowd scattered in terror. Villagers screamed, fleeing toward the main village path. Mothers grabbed their children. Elders stumbled in shock. Even the bravest men trembled, crossing themselves repeatedly. Pastor Nwosu clutched his Bible with white knuckles, shouting prayers into the wind, his voice cracking with fear. Amaka dropped to her knees as the whisper vibrated through her bones. C-H-U-K-W-U-E-M-E-K was the only one who didn't run. He rushed to her, kneeling in front of her, shielding her from the swirling dust as though his body alone could stand between her and the ancient force that hunted her. Leave her father shouted. Touch her, and if I move away from her now, Chukwuemeka yelled over the roaring wind, she will be taken. The words silenced the pastor, completely. Amaka trembled violently as the whisper circled her, pressing into her ears, into her heartbeat, into her mind. Memories she didn't recognize flashed behind her eyes, shadows, shrines, blood, moonlit offerings, a man kneeling, a name being spoken over a newborn child, her name. Make it stop, she cried, shaking uncontrollably. Please, Chukwuemeka, make it stop. Her father dropped to his knees beside her, praying fervently, tears streaming down his face. Yet despite the strength of his voice, despite the power of his faith, despite the authority of his calling, the whisper did not retreat. It grew louder, more possessive, more certain. She is mine by oath. The wind roared. Dust blinded her. Her body buckled as if invisible chains pulled at her limbs. Chukwuemeka grabbed her face between his hands, forcing her eyes to meet his. Amaka, listen to me, he said, urgency tightening his voice. You must breathe. You must stay here. Do not follow the voice. Do not give it power. I can't, she sobbed. It's pulling me, because it has claim, he shouted. Claim made long before you were old enough to speak. Her father's head snapped up, his expression horrified, guilt-ridden, exposed. Chukwuemeka continued, voice trembling with truth. I know what he promised. I know who answered that promise. And I know who has come to collect. Amaka stared at her father, her tears blurring everything. Papa, what is he saying? Pastor Nwosu's lips shook. His eyes filled with pain she had never seen in him before. But before he could speak, the whisper thundered again, anguished, furious. She belongs to me. A violent blast of wind shot through the clearing like a spear. Chukwuemeka wrapped his arms around Amaka, pulling her tightly against him as the force exploded around them. Trees bent. Dust swirled. The ground shook. Amaka screamed, burying her face in his shoulder. And then, silence. Deathly. Complete. The wind died instantly. The birds fell silent. The earth stilled. The whisper vanished. But as the dust settled, Chukwuemeka slowly released Amaka, his chest rising and falling with exhaustion. He turned toward the pastor, his eyes dark with solemn truth. "You cannot hide it anymore," he said quietly. "The oath has awakened, and the spirit that holds it will not rest." Her father lowered his head, tears sliding down his cheeks. "I did it to save her," he whispered brokenly. "I did it to save her life." Amaka stared at him, her entire world fracturing into pieces she couldn't hold. Chukwuemeka met her gaze, sorrow carving deep lines across his face. "Amaka," he said softly, painfully, "your father made a vow before you were born. He bound your destiny to an ancient spirit, and now it has come to claim you." The world around Amaka seemed to freeze in a haunting stillness after Chukwuemeka spoke those words. The air felt thick, as if the earth held its breath, waiting for her reaction. Amaka's mind spiraled in confusion, heartbreak, disbelief. She stared at her father, this man who had raised her with prayer, discipline, and unwavering love, unable to reconcile the image of the righteous pastor with the trembling man who had bound her to something ancient and dangerous. "Papa, what did you do?" she whispered, her voice barely holding together. Her father collapsed to his knees, tears flowing freely. "I was a young husband," he began, his voice breaking. "Your mother nearly died giving birth to you. The doctor said you wouldn't survive the night. I was desperate. I loved God with all my heart, but that night my fear was stronger than my faith." He dragged a shaking hand across his face. "I went into the forest to cry, to question, to beg. And an ancient priest appeared, one who guarded the forgotten shrines before the church came." The villagers gasped, but he continued. "He told me there was a way to save you. A vow, a covenant, a promise exchanged for your life." His chest shuddered. "I thought it was only symbolic, a protection prayer, a blessing. I did not know I was giving your name, your destiny, to an ancient spirit of the forest. I did not know it would return." Amaka felt her soul tear open. She wanted to scream, to run, to crumble into dust. But instead, she turned slowly toward Chukwuemeka. "You knew," she whispered. "You knew all along." Chukwuemeka lowered his head, not all at first. "But I felt the shift the moment you stepped near my shrine that day. The spirit recognized you. It moved. It whispered." His voice thickened with emotion. "I didn't just come near you to warn you, Amaka. I came because I saw the markings, the signs, the binding. I knew the oath was waking, and if you weren't protected, it would claim you." Amaka swallowed hard, her breathing uneven. The villagers trembled around them, afraid to come close, afraid to step away. The very air seemed to be listening. Suddenly, another violent ripple swept through the clearing, an unnatural cold that traveled across the earth like a living thing. The trees groaned, the light dimmed, the ground vibrated. And then the whisper returned, deep, furious, ancient. Amaka. It wasn't calling now. It was summoning, claiming, demanding the fulfillment of the oath that had been promised. Amaka staggered back, clutching her head as pain shot through her skull. Her legs buckled. Her breath hitched. Shadows moved around her feet, rising slowly like smoke. The villager screamed and fled again, calling on Jesus, calling on ancestors, calling on anything capable of fighting the force gathering in the clearing. But Chukwuemeka rushed toward her, grabbing her hands, grounding her before she collapsed. "Fight it," he urged. "Do not listen. Do not answer." "I can't," she cried, trembling uncontrollably. "It's inside my mind, inside my blood, because the oath was made with your bloodline." Chukwuemeka said painfully. "And to break it." He stopped, breathing hard. Amaka gripped his wrists. "To break it? What?" Chukwuemeka met her gaze with eyes full of war, sorrow, and fierce resolve. "You must confront it, in its own realm." Silence fell. A silence so deep, even the wind refused to move. The ground split in a thin line, glowing faintly as a dark mist rose from beneath it. The forest groaned. The air trembled. The whisper stretched, expanding into a voice no human throat could produce. "Come forward, child of the promise." Pastor Nwosu lunged toward his daughter, but a force pushed him back violently, throwing him onto the ground. He cried out, reaching toward her helplessly. "No, leave her alone." But Chukwuemeka stepped between Amaka and the rift forming beneath her feet. "If she goes alone, she will not return," he whispered. "If she refuses, the spirit will torment her for the rest of her life." Amaka's tears streamed freely. She looked between the two men, her father, who had unknowingly sentenced her future, and Chukwuemeka, who had risked everything to uncover the truth. Then I won't go alone, she whispered. You said I must confront it, but you didn't say I must confront it without help. Chukwuemeka froze. Amaka, take me there, she said, her voice trembling yet firm. If you know the path, take me. If you know its language, speak for me. If you know the old ways, use them. Chukwuemeka's breath caught. Her father shouted in horror, no. Amaka, stay here. But Amaka turned to him with heartbreaking resolve. Papa, this started with you, but it will end with me. And before her father could rise, before the villagers could intervene, before the darkness could swallow her entirely, Chukwuemeka pressed his forehead against hers and whispered the ancient invocation. The world burst open. The ground split beneath them. Darkness surged upward, and they were gone. The realm they entered was not night or day. It was something in between, a place where shadows moved like wind and ancient symbols glowed faintly beneath their feet. The air was thick with spirits, some watching silently, some whispering, some crawling through the shadows. Chukwuemeka held Amaka's hand firmly, pulling her close as they stepped into the heart of the spirit's domain. Don't look at them, he warned. Don't speak to them. Only focus on the one who calls you. Amaka nodded shakily, though fear clung to her bones. The path ahead twisted like a living serpent. Dark trees bent toward them. The air hummed with an ancient rhythm. And then, it appeared. The spirit, tall, shadowed, with the outline of a man but the presence of a god. Its voice echoed through the realm like thunder in slow motion. The child of my promise arrives. Amaka's knees gave way, but Chukwuemeka lifted her, forcing her to stand. Speak, he whispered. You must speak. Her throat tightened, but she faced the spirit. Why me? She whispered. Why my life? The spirit extended an arm made of shifting darkness. Your father sought your life. He begged for your breath. I granted it. And in return, you were promised to me at the fullness of your womanhood. Amaka shook her head violently. I never agreed. The spirit stepped closer. You were born under the oath. Blood does not ask permission. A tear slipped down her cheek. Then hear me now, she whispered. I reject it. The spirit roared, a sound that fractured the air. You do not break ancient law with mere words. And before she could react, the spirit lunged. Chukwuemeka stepped in front of her, casting symbols into the air, summoning ancient protections that lit up the darkness. The spirit recoiled, hissing. You, it snarled, son of the forgotten shrine. You dare shield what is mine. I dare fight for her, Chukwuemeka growled. With every breath in me, the spirit surged forward. The realm shook violently. Shadows swallowed the ground. Amaka felt her soul slipping. And then, she remembered Mama Ejik's words, Destiny is not a visitor you can send away. When it comes with its feet planted in the soil. But she finally understood. Destiny could be rewritten if one had enough courage. She stepped forward, pushing past Chukwuemeka. Spirit, she said, her voice shaking but strong. You saved me as a baby, but I am not yours. I will never be yours. The spirit towered over her. Then give back the life I granted. Amaka's breath froze. If it is my life you want, she whispered, you can have it. Amaka, no. Chukwuemeka shouted, but not through fear, through exchange. The spirit stilled. Chukwuemeka stared at her in disbelief. What are you doing? He cried. She squeezed his hand. Ending this. She faced the spirit. Take the oath. Break it. Release me. The spirit narrowed its eyes. And what is offered in exchange? Amaka lifted her chin. My freedom? For my lineage. My life. For my family. Release everyone else. Silence fell across the realm. Even the shadows stopped moving. Chukwuemeka grabbed her shoulders, voice breaking. You can't do this. Amaka, no. She looked at him, tears falling. If I don't, this thing will haunt everyone I love. It will never stop. The spirit reached out a hand of swirling darkness. Do we have an agreement? Amaka nodded. But the moment the spirit touched her chest, Chukwuemeka grabbed her wrist and shouted a single ancient word. The realm exploded with light. The spirit screamed. Chains of fire wrapped around it, pulling it back. Chukwuemeka pulled Amaka into his arms. Forgive me, he whispered. I will not let you die. And using the deepest power of his lineage, the forbidden one, he offered himself instead. The oath latched onto him. The spirit shrieked. The realm trembled. Shadows fractured. Then, something unexpected happened. Amidst the chaos, Amaka's hand found his, her eyes blazing with courage and love. She whispered a word of ancient truth she had learned from her mother in Chukwuemeka, an invocation not of fear but of love. The realm stilled. The light softened, the chains around the spirit dissolved. The darkness recoiled, then vanished entirely. Chukwuemeka's chest heaved, sweat and tears mingling. "Amaka, it worked," he whispered. "Your courage, your heart, it freed me." They held each other as the realm faded. When Amaka opened her eyes, she was back in the clearing. The villagers had gathered, praying, weeping, trembling. But the sun shone, the air was warm, the darkness gone. Chukwuemeka was there, standing before her, bruised but alive, his eyes soft and filled with love. He stepped forward. "Amaka," he said, voice steady, trembling with emotion, "our bond cannot be broken. Not by oath, not by fear, not by shadow. Only love can guide us now." Amaka fell into his arms, tears streaming freely. "I will never let go," she whispered. 7 days later, under the bright morning sun, the village celebrated not just their survival, but the union of two hearts that had defied destiny itself. Chukwuemeka and Amaka stood together, hand in hand, exchanging vows. The elders, the villagers, and even the whispering winds bore witness. The oath of old was gone, replaced by a love so fierce it conquered even the ancient powers. The forest at the village edge rustled softly, as if sighing in approval. Birds sang. The air shimmered with promise. And in that moment, Amaka and Chukwuemeka knew love had triumphed. Always. Hey, my Afritales family. Thank you so much for staying with me till the end of this powerful story. Your love, your comments, and your constant support truly mean everything. If you're new here, welcome to the family. Don't forget to subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to give you a shout out in my next video. This is Afritales by Sophyjay, where every tale carries the heartbeat of Africa.